Hey everybody, welcome back to World History. Today we are starting Chapter 8. This is our last chapter of the semester. So go ahead and pull out your Chapter 8 notes and let's get started. After today's notes, you are going to complete the reflection on learning assignment, which is posted on Google Classroom. So we're doing the first section, talking about monarchs, nobles, and all that jazz today. So nobles equal the church, which equal the monarchs, which equal power. A lot of what we talk about for these hierarchies and structures refers to the idea that each one of them essentially gets power from the other. During the High Middle Ages, the balance of power began to shift, more so away from the nobles and the church, and more towards the monarchs. They began to centralize power, expand their domains, establish their own justice systems, build their own government bureaucracies, taxes, standing armies, and they strengthened their ties with townspeople, more so than the other nobility and the church had done in previous years. So a lot of times more people were more readily willing to follow the king or whatever monarch was in the area. So we'll start with England. We're primarily going to be focused on England and France this unit. So a unified English kingdom emerged eventually. King Edward had died without an heir. That being said, a council of nobles then chose Edward's brother-in-law, Harold, to become king. That was then challenged by William, the Duke of Normandy, who was a distant cousin, if I remember correctly. So William the Conqueror, as you can see, he conquered England. At the Battle of Hastings, William actually defeated Harold pretty quickly and was crowned the King of England on Christmas Day in 1066. It's here we see British culture start to become a blending of French and Anglo-Saxon cultures, because by extension, William of Normandy was a Frenchman, now sitting on the British crown. He was extremely well versed in strategy, hence him winning the Battle of Hastings pretty easily and taking over England. So, some of the things he did to expand royal power. He granted fiefs to the church and the Norman lords or barons, essentially just giving them more land. And he had vassals that swore allegiance to him first before they would swear their allegiance to things like the church or any other nobles. He also saw the creation of the Domesday Book, which established efficient tax collection and led to an actual royal treasury being formed in Great Britain. As you can see at this point in time with Domesday England, the red dots are towns that are over 2,000 in population, with London being actually the largest. That is still very much true today. But as you can see, most of the northern part of what we consider the United Kingdom today didn't have any towns of notable size. So moving on to Henry II, William's successor, he expanded accepted customs into law, and traveling justices began to go everywhere to enforce the laws, especially under a system known as common law, or a legal system based on the customs and court rulings that applied to all. That included the king as well. As also establishing a jury system. Remember, we've talked about a jury all the way back when we talked about ancient Athens, but during the Dark Ages, that's one of the things that had gone away. This was a group of men sworn to speak the truth. Sorry, ladies, at this point in history, you couldn't serve on a jury. It was only for men. And they would decide which cases would go to trial in the form of a grand jury. We still have those today in our modern-day legal system. So there was some conflict with the church. So under the legal authority, members of the church thought that the nobility and the king had no right to try clergy in royal courts. And this was initially versus Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who eventually would become a martyr and saint for this whole philosophy, due to him being placed on trial. So rulers versus nobles and the church. A lot of the nobles and the church were not happy about them having to pay taxes, and they wanted to maintain that feudal system that we talked about last chapter. They liked it. It kept them in power. It get them a lot of money. They wanted to keep that for as long as possible. But royal authority wanted to take more control over that. And then we have King John, who lost land to Philip II of France, namely the lands of Normandy and Anjou, and then he lost a battle with Pope Innocent III. England faced an interdict, and England became a fief of the papacy, essentially meaning it was brought back into the fold of the Catholic Church. So a little bit more on King John. He lost versus the nobles as well. They really didn't pay much of their taxes and abused their power. They did force King John to sign the Magna Carta, probably one of the biggest accomplishments of this period in time. Nobles had certain rights, and this would later be expanded to all citizens, and monarchs were not above the Sorry about that. Sorry if you're wearing earbuds. That probably not will not be a good sound to hear. As I was saying, the Magna Carta essentially established that not even the king was above the law, and established something known as the due process of law, which protected free men from arrest, imprisonment, and other legal actions unless they were brought before a judge and by their peers and the law. This is something that we still have today in our modern day legal system. We also have habeas corpus. You cannot be held without being charged for a specific crime. Now, habeas corpus literally translates to have the body, essentially meaning you have to have proof in order to charge someone with a specific crime. Here's where they forced King John to sign the Magna Carta. So some of the creations of the Magna Carta also included Parliament, England's legislature, and it helped to unify them. And it laid a foundation for many future governments. Now, Parliament is broken into two houses, the House of Commons and the House of Lords. The House of Commons is made up primarily, at least in the Middle Ages, of people that represented the knights and the middle class, where the House of Lords, you probably guessed it, represents the nobles and the clergy. Now, the House of Lords was able to limit the king's power and control the power of the purse, as well as approve new taxes in the kingdom. Let's hop over to France real quick. So it's important to note, France was not a unified country or kingdom yet. It was a bunch of different smaller kingdoms, each one being ruled by either a different king or prince. Huge Capet was actually elected to the French throne and increased royal power by establishing a hereditary system, in which he would see the establishment of the Capetian or Capet dynasty that lasted the next 300 years. He added a lot of land to France. He also had a very effective bureaucracy in terms of order and collecting taxes and imposing laws. As you can see from this map down here, you can see all the different regions of what would eventually become France. Okay, so Philip Augustus, or technically Philip III, he paid middle-class officials, not nobles, and this was in exchange for their loyalty. He initiated a national tax. He increased royal land by taking land away from King John, like we talked about earlier, and at the time, he was the most powerful ruler in Europe. As you can see, from 1180 to 1223, this is all the land that he then controlled. So let's talk about Louis. So, he was a very religious man, and he went about persecuting heretics and Jews, mainly because they didn't follow Christianity. He would go on to lead 2 crusades, or wars versus Muslim people in Spain, and he would then establish a very efficient, centralized monarchy in France. There's him on the crusades. Oh yes, this is the gentleman that they named St. Louis after. So, clashing with the Pope. Philip IV versus Pope Boniface VIII. Now, again, same problem that England was having. France wanted to tax the clergy, and the church didn't like that. Now, both claimed that they had the ultimate power over clergy. And at this time, we also refer to it as the Great Schism. There was 2 popes, one in Rome and then one in Avignon, which is in France. And both claimed to be the true leader of the Catholic Church. So now you have a Great Schism, nobody knows who to follow, and you have 2 people competing for the same power. It was a disaster. So, in France, their system of government, at least prior to the French Revolution, was that of the Estates General, in which representatives from all 3 estates or classes were represented. Now, their 3 estates represented the clergy, the nobility, and then everybody else. Unlike Parliament, though, the Estates General had no power of the purse and no balance to royal power whatsoever, and each estate only got 1 vote, even though realistically, The estate representing the townspeople represented 97% of the French population. They only got one vote. All right, that's it for notes for today. I'll see you all next time. Bye, everyone.